Okay, hi everyone. So today I'm here with Mike Brady from Ireland. Mike is an agricultural consultant, land agent at the Brady Group, and he's a member of the board of Nuffield International. Mike, how are you doing?
How are you doing, Philip? Thank you for the invitation. Glad to be here.
Good. Yeah, thanks for joining us. And Ireland's always an interesting one for me. You are not our first Irish guest, and possibly one we might not need subtitles for, which is interesting.
No, I'll slow down so that everybody can speak us, so that everybody can understand,
Cool, thank you, Mike. So you're up in Cork, am I right?
Yeah, well, we say down in Cork. We're down the very south of the Republic of Ireland, second biggest city and the largest county.
Very nice. And you've been sending some pictures and videos of the Irish team in the Olympics. That's got your guys' tails wagging. How's the Olympics going for the Irish team?
Oh, absolutely superb. We're having our most successful Olympics ever. I think some smartass on social media has calculated the number of gold medals per million people, right? And I think we're top of that medal list at the moment.
That's good. That's good. Good for Ireland, and yeah, good rugby as well going on at the moment. Good Olympics. So all around, Ireland's nailing it.
Yeah, we kind of punch above our weight when it comes to sports, and which is great, because our Gaelic sports are our main sports. So all the sport, neither of those are in the Olympics. So it's good to be able to compete in a world scale with a population of 5 million.
Yeah, that is interesting. So just for the audience's benefit, Mike and I know each other. I think we got to know each other really well in 2022 on a Zimbabwean tour that you guys did and came through the country with current and past Nuffield scholars. Mike, and how was that tour and how was that experience for you guys coming through to Zim?
Oh, I can safely say, Philip, the best trip of my life.
Yeah.
I spent, well, I know I met yourself and Graham, and I know Rob Fisher for a long time, who's a fellow Nuffield scholar. So, how many were there? 20 of us in the group. We were there for 3 weeks, and I spent an extra week with Rob afterwards. Look, it's an amazing country. Like, you have so many positives, you have some negatives, obviously, as well. But, it's actually a point I make. Ireland were maybe the back of the class in Europe, maybe 40, 50 years ago. And, I can see Zim could be the same in Africa. It could be the most important country in Africa, and we've come to the front of the class in Europe now. We're up there with the first world countries, and there's no reason why Zim couldn't do that. It actually it pains me on one side, but the other side I can see so much potential, and that's not just from agriculture, from everything.
Yeah, I believe that. I mean, we're still here. The story well, especially with your friends with Rob Fisher. How many people have left Zim and our country folk, and we're here because of that exact hope. Zim it's got everything. It's got mineral wealth, it's got agricultural wealth, it's got cultural wealth, it's got one of the 7 wonders of the world. It has a lot to offer, and the people are amazing. As much as the hardships that the country's faced, the people are smiling, the people are laughing. We had some great sort of local interaction. I think you're at the front of that, and it's just a brilliant country.
Oh yeah, I got many offers. I'll put it that way, Philip. I went out into the countryside with Rob, collecting some wild seeds, flower seeds, his business, and it was amazing to meet 25 women at a crossroads, and Rob paying them out their cash, and we weighing the seeds and bringing them back. It was mind-blowing experience for me,
Yeah, and it's interesting. So my old man also does a similar project with flower seeds, where he gets small-scale farmers to do the flowers, and the women take charge, and they take charge of the finances, because otherwise the husband takes the money and goes to the bar, and they never see the money again. So yeah,
I met a few lads there as well who are at the top of the queue, I think, for that. Yeah. No, wonderful. You have a great country. Great country.
Thank you, Mike. Yeah. We're yet to be in Ireland, but the plan is 2026. Hopefully, we see you guys there at the sort of triennial conference that Nuffield will hold. So hopefully, we get to visit you guys.
The organising has already commenced.
Nice. So, Mike, one of the reasons I wanted to speak to you today is because you've got a lot of experience in the agricultural sector. Through Nuffield, you have, I think, a grasp on the international perspective as well. So you know Ireland, you know the rest of the world, and one of the topics that's coming up everywhere is succession planning. So just to share my own experience, what I've seen, again, I don't know Ireland yet. I'm yet to go there. But we saw it in Canada. We saw it in the United States. We see the average age of farmers north of 60, which is a problem. We're seeing kids that are not wanting to farm. We're seeing farms lost to corporates because of this opportunity, putting more and more strain on an agricultural sector. So I just wanted to get your sort of opinion on that. So where is Ireland in regards to this, and what do you think on the rest of the world?
Okay, that's a very big question. The first point I'm going to make is I'm nearly 40 years as an agricultural consultant, right? And I consult in Ireland primarily, worked in the UK for a while back when I commenced my career. But I've been going to conferences for 40 years, and I've been hearing that the average age of farmers is early 60s, and that farming is going to fall off the cliff. And from an Irish perspective, and I'm sure it's true for other countries as well, it's actually a bit of a myth. And I'm sure the stat is correct, okay? But obviously they're dying off and being replaced by other guys, right? But
by other old guys.
Exactly. But from an Irish perspective, that figure is very false. Because, and I'll give you the reason, and I'll drill into Ireland then from a succession point of view. In Ireland, we'll say a very typical time for succession to occur is when the owner or the parents reach what's called pension age. They get a state pension at 66 years of age. There's also a tax incentive to transfer a farm to a young farmer before their 35th birthday. Okay. So what you find on farms, to go back to the age thing, right? You know, it might be the 29-year-old, 30-year-old, 31-year-old is actually in charge of the farm. He just doesn't own it. Because his name isn't on the farm doesn't mean that he's not the one running it, you know? I always find, from my experience, you take a sales representative going onto a farm, the guy that wants to get paid for the feed or the fertilizer or whatever, right? The person he goes to is the person that runs that farm, you know? And that's the person that manages the checkbook, you know? So very often I think that, you know, that 27 to 35-year-old, they're actually in charge, but on paper, the parents are still in charge. That's a fact for Ireland anyway, and I'm sure it's true in other countries as well, you know. But to succession in Ireland, right? Succession in Ireland is easier than other countries, and I'll tell you why. I suppose a lot of it's to do with our history, okay? In that security of tenure in respect of land is very strong. There's a strong attachment to land, and I suppose it's kind of worldwide known, we were occupied by the Brits for 800 years, which they had landlords that owned it large. I think I read something recently that pre the famine, we had a great potato famine in 1845, which you may have heard of. I think it's in the mid 1800s anyway. And I think there were 5,000 landowners in the country back then, which were landlords that were renting out the land to tenants. All of that changed. And we got independence in 1916, so just over 100 years, and all the land was redistributed through what's called a land commission, and the holdings were a little small, not as small now as I've seen I've seen this done in Romania after communism. We've seen it done in Zim, right, where, you know, the majority got very small plots of land, which
like 1 or 2 hectares.
Yeah, useless. Like, so our average size is 33 hectares, I think now, which is not very big.
It's not sustainable, surely.
Well, we've about 100,000 farms. We've 140,000 claiming EU payments, but there's probably about 100,000 commercial farms. Half of those are part-time. So, and the other half then are full-time. Okay, so So you could say half our farmers are viable full-time family farms, and like you said, that's a very small farm to be viable on, but that's it. That's not far off 100 acres. Dairy farming is the most profitable enterprise of the main enterprises. And a guy that owns his own land, he's not renting any land, and he's his own labour. They're making roughly €1,000 a cow, and on 100 acres, you'd have roughly 100 cows. So he's making roughly €100,000 a year. Which is a decent income. Exactly. Now he has to live out of that. That's like his gross salary is to live out of it, pay his tax, pay back his loans, and replace his equipment out of that. But it's they work hard, but it is viable. And like, I'm not a great fan of the term a family farm, because in my opinion, every farm is a business, whether it is a corporation or whether it is a family farm, is still a business. You still got to add up. You still got to do your business plans and have your goals and know where you're going. So it's important to put that, like you mentioned some of the corporate stuff at the start, like, one of the reasons, I suppose, why corporate farms are thriving worldwide is because the margin is so low per hectare or per animal, or whatever unit you want to use. So you need vast scale to be able to make a return out of it or make a living out of it. And I think we've cracked that one certainly somewhat in Ireland.
Yeah, that's interesting to hear that, because pre this recording, we had a quick chat, and already like you challenged it, and it was interesting for me because Canada, you're driving through ghost towns. Like, the most eerie thing for me was the ghost towns in Canada, where there were thriving communities, there were schools, there were little co-ops, and you drive through it and it's overgrown, and there's not a soul, not even an old dog anymore. And the reason is because all the land had been bought up by these mega corporates, and so the kids stopped going to school, and so the whole town and community died, packed up, and moved away. We certainly had the same in the USA. So it was really interesting from your perspective that you guys, you're front running on the Olympics, and it looks like you're getting this one taped as well.
Yeah, well, it's difficult because, see, all right, when the land was redistributed, and said we've ended up with average holdings of around 80-something acres or 33 hectares, the government recognised with dairy farming about 10 or 12 years ago that the holdings are a bit small. So they've put in place some tax incentives to incentivize people that are leasing out their land to get a tax benefit for doing a long-term lease. Because in the past, we had this system called Conacre, which was just, you rent it for 10 months. And somebody would take it for 10 months, effectively abuse the land. They're not going to put any money into it if you think it's going to be put up for letting again in 10 months' time, So now we have very generous tax relief now for a 15-year lease, a 10-year lease, a 7-year lease, and a 5-year lease. In fact, for a 15-year lease, you can earn €40,000 of rent tax-free.
Sure.
Per annum, which is very attractive to somebody who wants to cease farming, retire, and lease out their land. Then the neighbour rents it, and he has a bit of security, and he can reseed the land, put some lime and fertilizer into it, fence it, water it, take care of the land, and farm it properly.
That's really cool, Mike. And then just coming to the dairy figure. So if dairy is being obviously encouraged because it's the most profitable on that land size, you guys must be exporting most of your milk.
Yeah, over 90% of our produce is exported. And that goes for beef as well, both dairy and beef. I think the figures, Phil, are we produce enough food to feed 50 million people.
Okay.
So we're a very good exporting nation. Now, people look at us like we have a reputation being a green island, and agriculture. I'm sure if you did a straw poll in America or United Kingdom and ask what is the main enterprise or the main industry in Ireland, lots of people would say agriculture, but it's not. Agriculture is only 8% of GDP. Okay. So Ireland is driven by IT and pharmaceuticals.
That's no idea.
All the big IT companies, their HQs are not, the European HQs are in Ireland.
Why would that be?
That's a good question. Very good question. It's been asked a lot of times, right?
Not the weather.
Definitely not the weather. Definitely not the weather. There are three main reasons. One, we're English speaking.
Yeah.
If you can understand this, right?
Yeah, I didn't want to say it.
Number two is well educated, very well educated. Okay.
Yeah.
And number three is probably the most important one, but it's the combination of the three. We have a 12.5% corporation rate of tax.
Okay. So there's benefits.
Yeah. So if you're Apple, Apple actually are in Cork City since the 1970s, actually, right? And their European HQ is here, and I think they employ 8,000 people in Cork City.
Wow.
Like it's
Okay.
phenomenal. Like and they pay well as well, you know. And there's a lot of spin-off industries from that. Then you know,
Sure.
courier businesses and small subcontractors, electrical contractors, everything. You know, like, there's a lot of like it create, and we've the same thing with pharmaceuticals. So yeah, they're the three reasons. Donald Trump has been threatening to try and get some of those companies back, I think, to bring some of those jobs back to America, which is a little worry from our perspective. But I think they're so embedded here now. Like this week, Intel have announced, the chip maker, they've announced that they're shedding 15,000 jobs worldwide. But like they put €1 billion or something into a project here in Ireland last year, you know, and yet they're shedding jobs, you know. I don't think there'll be a lot of jobs shed here. But so we're in a very strong position. We were clever with that, I think. And now with you know, the United Kingdom is going a bit off the rails, you know, and like, you know, they've had Brexit, so they're outside the EU now. We're really the only English-speaking first world nation in the whole EU 27 now.
Sure, that's interesting. I didn't know that. And that was a complete sidetrack, and it's leading to more sidetrack questions. So I want to come back to one of the succession questions I've got, but I want to run down this for a little bit. Going back to the dairy and the export margin, when we were in Denmark this last month, there was a lot of conversation around carbon footprints, a lot of conversations around cattle impacting sort of the atmosphere, and they're having discussions to reduce 30% of their farms, I think as early as 2030, because they export so much. They don't need to, and then therefore don't have to destroy the environment so much. Are these the same conversations that are being had in Ireland? Are we going to be looking at reduction of farmers, more rewilding, more looking at carbon footprints?
Yes is the answer to the question, right? You know, every country, every first world country, anyway, you know, has a focus from a greenhouse gas perspective, you know. For Ireland, because we've no heavy industry, so we've no mining or no coal production or gas production, the pointer, our dairy cow numbers increased significantly between 2011 and 2022. And all the public pointing is on dairying, you know. And in fact, like there's a very good reason why our dairy cow numbers increased. You might have heard of European Union milk quotas. They were brought in 1983, where there was too much milk being produced in the EU. So the European Union brought in milk quotas. So whatever amount of milk you produced and sold in 1983, that became your quota. You couldn't sell any more milk than that, unless you could lease and buy some quota, but the country had a limit. So in Ireland, we've a climatic advantage of producing milk from grass, and we were prevented using that climatic benefit for over 30 years. And in 2007, the EU announced the milk quotas were going to go in 2015. And if you remember, we had a big property boom actually in the early noughties, and then everything crashed in 2008, you know, the layman's crash, and we were in a recession immediately. But our government are pretty nimble, and they sat down and they said, right, the EU have announced the milk quotas are going. We have a climatic advantage here with dairying. Let's help the dairy industry develop over the next number of years. And they put a plan in place in 2011 called Food Harvest 2020, where there was a national plan to increase milk production by 50%, and we blew it out of the water in 2018.
Nice.
But it has stopped now. Now, just one interesting point on it, to back your point about the environment. We actually have the same amount of ruminant livestock in the country today as we had in 1983.
So that's just efficiencies going up.
No, cow numbers, dairy cow numbers have gone up, and suckler cow numbers have fallen. Beef cow numbers have fallen.
Okay.
And they're probably linked. And the actual complete opposite happened when milk quotas were brought in 1983. Cow numbers fell from 1983 to 2011, dairy cow numbers, and suckler cow numbers increased.
Went up.
And it's gone the opposite way now again. So, like, I don't know how much into the greenhouse gas thing you are, but you've probably heard of this GWP stars, that they call it. You know, it's the warming effect of methane. Like, they take it that if you don't increase ruminant stock numbers in 12 years' time, it's just going around in a cycle. It's not contributing to warming anymore. So, like, if you take that argument from an Irish ruminant livestock point of view, we're not contributing to warming at all, because we have the same number of ruminant livestock that we had in 1983. So that's one side of the argument. Now, the other side of the argument is, our cow numbers, if we reduced our cow numbers, yes, it would contribute to cooling down the planet, right? But our argument is that we're producing milk at a lower carbon footprint than anywhere else on the planet. New Zealand will compete with us, obviously, in the Southern Hemisphere. So if we don't produce the milk, the Americans will produce it at a higher carbon footprint, which warms up the planet more. So there is a big debate there. There's a huge debate there. But just at a simple point, I think science will solve it.
I think so. And like, I just think the conversation's mad. And this is just from a little third world perspective. We've got a world to feed. And when you start talking about taking farmers back or reducing this, reducing that, it's like, it's almost want to say it's like a first world problem, which is ignorant of what's going on. Yes, the third world needs to come to the table. Yes, we need to start learning how to feed ourselves here. But at the same time, that's not happening. Will it happen because of the political sort of governance in these countries? And we're hurting mouths, we're hurting bellies. And it's just a crazy conversation. And France was a really good example, because they were 100% self-sufficient on their beef. They put a lot of pressure on reducing cattle numbers because of, the sort of methane. The beef consumption in France has gone up, but they are now only 60%, sufficient on credit on producing their own beef. So someone somewhere else in the world is now producing the beef that's coming to France. So
I guarantee it's being produced in Brazil. That's where it's being produced.
100%. So you've put pressure on your farmers. God knows what strain they've been under for you to get those numbers reduced, et cetera, thinking you're doing something for the environment. You're hurting your farmers, but the people of France, the beef consumption is going up.
Well, you can take the polarized version, and to put it crudely, do we want to starve or burn on the planet? Which do we want first? That's the polarized view of it. But I'm a firm believer, particularly our dairy farmers. I know what they're bright, they're educated, they understand. Like, they don't want the planet to burn either. So we want to produce milk and do it in a environmentally friendly manner. And like we've a very good industry here, where like our agricultural industry is very well joined up, right from farmer to advisors to research to government to marketing the product, and to the consumer. There's a really well joined up chain there. And I firmly have the opinion, when we will be in 2050 looking back at which industries did their bit to save the planet, agriculture will be top of the class.
Well, everyone's working hard. I can tell you from this global focus program I've just been on, everyone, except the Americans, are having the conversation. Yeah. And I'll give them credit as well. We asked a question in Fresno, and they said, well, we've just turned a desert into an agricultural powerhouse. Like, why do we need to be talking about carbon footprints? So they had I suppose, seemed like a good argument. But I agree. I think farmers everywhere, even here in Zim, are talking about regen and carbon footprints and carbon sequestration, and everyone's having the conversations. The guys are doing the work.
It's gone beyond the conversation here. The research is happening and the measures are coming into farming. And like, that's one, the common agricultural policies and the subsidies that are paid are often criticised, but a really good positive is, like, if you talk to any Irish farmer, the last thing he wants to do is lose any of his payments. Okay, so if you ask him to plant 10 trees a year so that he can keep his payments, he'll plant the bloody trees, like, you know. Yeah. It's kind of a stick approach, but there's a carrot and a stick approach, right? And we're using the CAP, and the EU are using the CAP monies to, like, the CAP money went in your back pocket 20 years ago, you know, but now you have to work to get it. And, you know, the measures you carry out are good for the planet, and they're good for farming too. Like, the social media, like, one of the big negatives of social media is that it pits people against each other, you know, and like you've environmentalists on one side of the bell curve, and you have agriculturists at the other side of the bell curve. The reality is the majority of people in the middle don't really care, you know. Yeah. So the people on the ground, environmentalists and farmers, have got to work together, to me, to get the best bang for buck on carbon sequestration and reducing greenhouse gases. And it's certainly going to happen in our country, and I can definitely see it happening in first world countries. You know, whether it happens in other countries, I don't know. Like, you've got a question like China, India, and Asia. You know, is it even being talked about? Like, that's the question, you know.
Yeah, interesting. So that was a complete diversion from the topic, and it's a great conversation to have. I'm glad we went down that road. But Mike, I wanted to come back to on the succession planning thing. I know something that people have been struggling with is, how is it approached when you're a younger adult or you're a younger kid? You feel that you need to be able to speak to your parents now. Or, you know, how do I have that conversation where I don't want to make the folks look bad, I don't want them to feel old, but I'm ready now to take over this farm, and I want to go, I want to grab the reins and run with it, you know? Like, is there a push-pull effect, and how is that approached?
That's interesting. It's not a problem in Ireland, and the reason why it's not a problem in Ireland, because there are 3 taxes when you take over a farm. There's stamp duty, capital gains tax, and capital acquisitions tax. But the latter 2 are not really a problem in general. The first one, stamp duty, is, but there's an exemption from stamp duty if you transfer a farm to your son or daughter before their 35th birthday.
Yeah.
So, to give it a practical example, in my office, I could have the son or daughter, usually the son or daughter will ring up and say, I'm 35 next month. My parents have done nothing. Would you talk to them? Right?
Okay. So one of the approaches is phoning Brady and saying,
Well, through the ag advisor, it could be whoever the advisor is for the farm is the obvious person to have the conversation. That's the answer to your question, really. He's the obvious person to talk to, and that could come from the beneficiary, or it could come from the donor. You know, it can come from the parents or the kids. I find I get all aspects. Sometimes you get the kid comes in, the parents come in separately, other family and the other siblings have nothing to do with it, the other children. Some cases the whole bloody family comes in, you know. And it's having the conversation that's from the farm point of view is not an issue really in Ireland, right? It's assumed that if you're at home full time and as a son or a daughter, you've got your qualifications, you've gone away and got your experience, you're working with your mum or dad, they're heading to the pension age of 66. It's taken as read that the farm is going to be transferred. Maybe not all of it, but a certain amount, the majority of it is usually done. So, but interestingly, I was out with a client last week, and he's milking about 200 cows, and they have a big cheese business. But his mum runs a cheese business, and she's in her early 70s, and she's like Margaret Thatcher, right? She's the Iron Woman, right?
Nice.
And her son is in his early 50s. And we actually had the conversation of the question that you just asked. How are we going to get her to... The son went out of the cheese business about 15 years ago and just concentrated on the farm because he got married, had kids, concentrated on milking the cows and doing that. He upped the cow numbers. And I've been working with him on that. I've had absolutely nothing to do with the cheese business. And he's now at the stage, if I don't get the cheese business now, there'll be no cheese business there in 10 or 12 years time, like, you know.
Yeah.
And they have a good brand and everything. And so we actually sat down and discussed how we would broach that subject.
How would you talk to shame? Yeah.
Yeah, but so that's individual, I think, to every family, you know. But I think it's find a trusted advisor. To me, would be, and I know maybe I'm biased saying that from my point of view, but somebody like me has nothing to gain in a succession talk. The satisfaction, yeah, fair enough. I'm going to get paid for my time in it, but the real satisfaction for me is that family. You know, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years down the road, you meet them at a wedding or a funeral or something like that, and they say to you, you know, thank you. You know, what you did, the advice you gave us was very solid. I actually have one small story on that. About, it was 15 years ago. This farmer, he wanted both his sons to go dairy farming. And milk quotas were still there at the time. And I remember saying to him, Pat, look, this isn't going to happen. Like, you know, there's only one of them will be going farming here. But anyway, he insisted on having a meeting with himself, his wife, and 2 sons. There were daughters there as well, but they weren't involved. And the second son was, he's a real go-getter. The man was ambitious. Like, and I was cold across the table. I said, look, one of the 2 of you are going to have to get this. And the other lad was already at home, right? Full-time, the eldest son. And I knew the second guy wasn't happy with me. Like, you know, I knew that. Yeah. He went away off farm and developed, actually, in renewable energy, actually, is his business now. But I met him at a match about 10 or 12 years later, a Gaelic football match. And he came up to me, shook my hand. He says, how are you? I'm good, he says. He said, there's one thing I've been meaning to say to you for the past 10 years. He said, you saved me, he said.
You got me off the farm.
Yeah, exactly. Because he probably might have stayed with the brother, and that would have been a real disaster. Like, you know,
would have. There's a lot of, there's a lot of family fallouts, and we love our families too, but in close quarters, it can really be iron filing iron. And I think that's a really good take on, Mike, because you know what, it's a very difficult subject to approach. A lot of us, or a lot of people, don't know how to approach. On my side of this side of 40, how do you approach a parent without being insulting? So we end up not having the conversations, and it becomes suppressive, or it pushes kids out, or you never know what that family dynamic is. So go to your advisor, ask your ag advisor. They're a really good person to come in and actually open the conversation.
Like, it could be the accountant as well, even though I find it accountants don't have Wellington boots. Like, you know, they don't get out on farms that much, you know.
I don't know who's listening to this. I got things I'm going to hold back with accountants.
I know, like, don't get me going on accountants, but but no, like, a lot of in Ireland, certainly a lot of specialist farm accountants would be a first port of call as well, and would be to me, it's just somebody who has an understanding of people and the business. See, probably, Phil, 8 out of 10 of them are not going to be a problem. You know, we always hear about the difficult ones, and like in Ireland here, we have specialist services. Actually, we have a Nuffield scholar. I think she trades at Succession Ireland, and I've recommended 1 or 2 cases that I've had onto her because they're beyond me fixing them. Like, I'm Mr. Practicality, you know. This is the tax. This is what you can make. This is the logical solution. This is what's done on, 500 other farms that I've worked on over the past 10 or 12 years. Here's how you fit in. Here's option A. Here's option B. Here's option C. They'll work. C. The rest of the options don't work. Pick one. Right, you know, and that's being practiced. No, that's a bit cold and blunt said like that, but that's what it is.
I understand that language better, so it is. That's exactly how it is often. Like, there's a choices, choose one. It is like that.
It ends up like that, and like the people who want to question it and all that, that's great. But some people are settling. Like, I had one now of a guy. He was in his 80s, right, and he knew my mum, and I was recommended in because he wasn't handed over to the son. And now the son wasn't what we would say the sharpest tool in the shed, right? But he was still a reasonable farmer, right? And like, dad was 84 years of age. But he knew my background. He had known my mum and her brothers and sisters and things growing up and things like that. And I got talking to him anyway. And you know what it was? What was holding him back was he was let down by his dad.
So
He was let down. He was let down by his dad during succession. And he still held that close to his heart, and he couldn't bring himself to let the farm go to his son.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So it's your personal experience in life too, like everything, eh? What defines us and our experiences, what we go through makes the man. That's really interesting, and that can have an effect.
You know all about that.
Yeah. Mike, this has been great. I think we could speak for ages on whatever topic we chase. But I'd love to have you back on the show. This is pretty much our time up. But thank you so much for joining us and for the advice and the stories. It was great chatting to you.
Phil, pleasure.